You were betrayed, not because you were weak, but because your light revealed the shadows in another's heart. There are those who walk among you who fear accountability. They fear exposure. They fear the consequences of the wounds they willingly inflicted. And so they hide. They hide behind excuses. They hide behind the illusion of new connections. They hide behind the very third party for whom they abandoned loyalty. They hide because the truth of what they did is heavier than their conscience can bear. But listen closely. The one who betrayed you does not want you to know the real reason they left. Not at any cost. Because if you knew, the power they once held over your heart would crumble into dust. They do not want you to know that their betrayal was not an act of strength, but an act of fear. Fear of facing their own emptiness. Fear of being truly seen. Fear of the depth and intensity of the connection they had with you. They do not want you to know that they still feel the weight of what they did, that whispers of regret visit them in the silence, that the choice they made burns them more deeply than they admit. They do not want you to know that the third party was never a replacement, only a distraction, a temporary escape from their own unhealed wounds. They do not want you to know that your spirit, your strength, and your purity of heart remain unmatched, unforgettable, irreplaceable. But hear this final truth, carved with the authority of the heavens. Your worth was never touched by their betrayal. Your destiny was never derailed. Your path was never weakened. Their choices speak only of who they are, not of who you are. Rise, therefore, unchained. Walk forward in unshaken dignity. Let no betrayal define your spirit. Stand in the radiance of your own truth, for no shadow cast upon you has the power to dim a light that was forged for higher things. You are defended, you are guided, you are stronger than what hurt you, and what was meant to break you will become the testimony of your rising. Their betrayal was rooted in fear, not your inadequacy, and though this truth may seem simple on the surface, it carries a depth that overturns the entire narrative you may have carried within yourself. When someone turns away from you, when they choose another path, another person, or another illusion, the mind naturally seeks fault within itself. You begin to question your worth, your value, your actions, every memory, every moment. You replay what happened, searching for where you might have failed, what you could have done differently, how you could have prevented the unraveling. But this keynote reminds you that your supposed inadequacy was never the cause. You were never the flaw in the story. Their fear, deep, unprocessed, and consuming, was the true catalyst. Fear comes in many forms. It can disguise itself as indifference, anger, avoidance, or impulsive decisions that look like betrayal. Yet at its core, fear is about the inability to hold, face, or honor something powerful. In your case, you were the powerful thing. The depth of connection you offered, the sincerity you carried, the vulnerability you allowed, All of it demanded an emotional capacity they did not possess. To truly receive someone who is genuine requires courage. It requires transparency. It requires a willingness to be seen without armor. And not everyone is ready for that, even if they crave it. Your presence may have illuminated parts of them they were not ready to confront. It may have revealed wounds within them that they had spent years avoiding. It may have reflected potential they felt unworthy of embracing. This is why the betrayal happened, not because you lacked something, but because you triggered something in them that they had no idea how to handle. Fear also manifests as sabotage. When someone subconsciously believes they are unworthy of love, harmony, or depth, they destroy what feels too pure. Your presence may have felt too honest, too steady, too real, and instead of rising to meet that energy, they collapsed beneath it. To preserve their familiar comfort zone, they may have gravitated towards someone who demanded less of them emotionally or spiritually. Someone who would not challenge their internal emptiness. Someone who would not mirror truth back at them. The third party became a refuge from responsibility, not a reflection of your lack. Your perceived inadequacy was never the reason they strayed. The truth is, they ran from the intensity of what they felt for you, not from the absence of it. Fear makes people choose temporary comfort over long-term growth. It convinces them that the easy path is safer, even if it is shallow. When they chose the third party, they chose someone who allowed them to stay small. Someone who did not require introspection, someone who allowed them to avoid the emotional expansion that being with you would have demanded. They were intimidated by your emotional strength, your clarity, your ability to love with depth. Fear will always prefer the familiar pain over unfamiliar healing. So they betrayed you not because they sought something better, but because they sought something easier, and easier never means superior. Your inadequacy was never the issue. If anything, your strength, your emotional availability, and your authenticity were the very things that triggered their retreat. People sabotage what they do not feel prepared to receive. They betray what they subconsciously believe they cannot sustain. They run from what magnifies their insecurities. You may have shown them a glimpse of what genuine connection looks like, and instead of rising, they recoiled. Their betrayal was a testament to their limitations, not yours. When someone operates from fear, they will justify their actions with excuses, deflections, and narratives that shift blame away from themselves. They may try to convince themselves, and sometimes even you, that their decision was logical or necessary. They may paint you as too much, too intense, too emotional, too demanding, too this or too that. But those labels are weapons created by fear, not reflections of truth. What feels like too much to someone emotionally unprepared will feel like finally to someone who is ready. Your depth is only overwhelming to those who have not yet learned how to swim. Fear also makes people hide. They hide the truth from you, and often from themselves. They hide their regrets. They hide their shame. They hide the uncomfortable reality that their betrayal was not a choice rooted in strength or clarity, but in avoidance. They do not want you to know that stepping away from you felt like stepping away from potential they were too afraid to embrace. They do not want you to know that on some level, losing you was losing the safest storm they ever encountered. A storm that could have washed them clean if only they had stood in it instead of running. When someone betrays out of fear, they often expect you not to realize your own worth. They expect you to internalize the pain as self-blame. They expect you to shrink, to doubt yourself, to question your own light. But their expectation does not define your destiny. Their fear should never define your identity. The truth is that you were offering a connection that required courage, responsibility, and emotional evolution. They were not ready for that journey. Instead of rising to meet it, they chose the shortcut that led them away from themselves. Your inadequacy had nothing to do with their actions, because inadequacy was never present in you. What was present in you was depth, strength, authenticity, courage, emotional truth. And these qualities are intimidating to those who are still fighting their own shadows. You showed up with openness, and they showed up with fear. You built bridges, and they built walls. You sought connection, and they sought escape. None of that speaks to your deficiency, it speaks entirely to their unreadiness. When you understand that their betrayal was rooted in fear, you reclaim your power. You stop carrying the weight that is not yours. You stop questioning your value. You stop replaying moments to look for flaws. You realize that the breaking of the connection was never about you being unworthy. It was about them being unprepared. Their fear dictated their actions, but fear does not dictate your future. What they could not handle, someone else will cherish. What they feared in you, someone else will celebrate. What they betrayed, someone else will protect. Their fear was the cause. Your inadequacy was never part of the story. They used the third party as a distraction, not a replacement. This truth stands quietly behind the chaos of betrayal, often unseen at first, because pain makes everything look larger, deeper, and more permanent than it truly is. But when the emotional fog begins to clear, a deeper pattern emerges. The one who betrayed you didn't walk away because they found something superior. They walked away because they needed something easier, something that didn't require accountability, honesty, or emotional elevation. The third party served as a temporary refuge, a shield from the truth of who they were and the truth of what they felt for you. People often assume that betrayal signifies preference, that the one chosen must be somehow more desirable. But reality is rarely that simple. More often, the third party embodies convenience rather than connection. They offer a space where the betrayer does not have to confront their own flaws, heal their emotional wounds, or meet the standard of authenticity that being with you required. This makes the third party a distraction, a place to hide, a way to escape reflection, a temporary mask that prevents them from seeing themselves clearly. The human psyche can only tolerate so much truth at once. When someone with deep insecurities encounters a connection that demands growth, accountability, or vulnerability, it can trigger a level of discomfort they are unprepared to face. You represented a mirror, one that reflected both their potential and their unhealed fragments. You challenged their emotional laziness simply by existing, because your presence carried substance. They realized that maintaining a connection with you would require effort, emotional honesty, self-discipline, self-awareness, and perhaps even transformation. For someone who has avoided inner work for years, that realization can feel overwhelming. So instead of rising, they retreated. And where did they retreat? Into the arms of someone who made it easy for them to remain exactly as they were. The third party is often someone who asks little, questions little, expects little, and sees little. Someone who allows them to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. Someone who does not illuminate their shadows or challenge their contradictions. Someone who provides emotional silence, where you brought emotional depth, superficial peace, where you offered transformative truth. The betrayals that look like passion from the outside are, in reality, often acts of emotional surrender, not to love, but to fear. They use the third party to distract themselves from the guilt of what they felt for you. When the connection between two souls runs deeper than expected, it becomes frightening, not because it is wrong, but because it is real. Authenticity is rare, and rare things demand courage. It's easier to pursue a shallow imitation than to face the intensity of something genuine. The third party became a buffer, a way to avoid dealing with the overwhelming pull they felt toward you. By giving their time and attention to someone else, they attempted to silence the voice inside that kept calling them back to you. But distractions only work temporarily. Eventually, the truth slips through the cracks. You can't replace what was never competing. You can't substitute depth with convenience and expect satisfaction. The one who betrayed you may have convinced themselves for a moment that the third party was what they wanted. But deep down they knew the truth. This new connection wasn't filling anything, it was simply numbing something. They used the third party to distract themselves from their own emotional immaturity. Being with you would have required them to step up, to meet you at a higher level, to grow. Instead of taking that path, they ran towards someone who allowed them to remain emotionally stagnant. It's easier to be adored without effort than to be loved with expectation. The third party provided that comfort. They offered validation without self-reflection, intimacy without responsibility, connection without depth. For a person who fears growth, this can seem like a relief, until the emptiness returns. And the emptiness always returns, because no distraction lasts forever. When someone chooses a third party out of fear, loneliness, confusion, or insecurity, they don't build a foundation, they build a hiding place. But hiding places are temporary by nature. They crumble the moment reality knocks on the door. The person who betrayed you may not admit it, but the distraction eventually becomes its own burden. It cannot replace what was real. It cannot replicate what was meaningful. It cannot satisfy what was awakened by you. The third party was never a replacement, because replacements require equivalency. They require matching energy, matching depth, matching significance. The person they ran to did not mirror your strength, your presence, your sincerity, or your emotional resonance. You were irreplaceable not because you are flawless, but because your connection was authentic. Real connections are not interchangeable. They cannot be swapped out like objects. They carve themselves into the emotional memory, into the subconscious, into the soul. Even if the third-party relationship looks stable on the surface, it often functions like a bandage placed over a wound that was never cleaned. Everything may appear calm, but internal truths never vanish. They simply wait. They wait for the moment when distractions stop working, when silence becomes loud, when emotional bypassing collapses under its own weight. And when that moment comes, the one who betrayed you cannot escape the unavoidable realization: the third party was not chosen because they were better. They were chosen because they were easier. This understanding doesn't diminish the pain you felt. Betrayal wounds deeply, even when you know the truth behind it. But it does correct the narrative. It returns the power to where it belongs. It reminds you that your value was never tied to someone's fear-driven decisions. You were not abandoned because you were lacking. You were abandoned because your presence revealed truths someone else was not ready to face. The third party was never a replacement for you, because you cannot replace what you do not understand. You cannot substitute what you do not possess. What you offered was unique, and what you represented was profound. They may have tried to bury that truth beneath a distraction, but distractions dissolve. Truth does not. In the end, the person who betrayed you was not moving toward something greater. They were running from something deeper. And what they ran from was never you, it was themselves. They hide the truth because it exposes their own weakness. This is a reality many struggle to accept, because when someone betrays you, the instinct is often to assume they left with confidence, that they acted from certainty, that they made a choice based on something solid. But in most cases of emotional betrayal, especially when a third party is involved, the betrayer is not acting from strength. They are acting from the desire to conceal something fragile within themselves. Their actions are driven not by clarity, but by avoidance, not by conviction, but by fear. And the truth they work so hard to hide is not about you. It is about what they refuse to confront in themselves. Some truths, when exposed, unravel the narratives people cling to. They challenge the stories a person tells themselves to maintain a sense of stability or righteousness. When someone betrays you, they instinctively know that facing what they did would require admitting their insecurities, their cowardice, their impulsiveness, or their emotional immaturity. It would force them to acknowledge that they acted from shadow, not from strength. And this kind of self-confrontation is something many people avoid at all costs. They hide the truth because showing it would require humility, something they have not cultivated. Admitting the real reason for their behavior would mean saying, "I wasn't ready for the connection," or "I acted out of fear," or "I didn't want to be accountable." These confessions demand vulnerability. They require a person to look inward and recognize where they failed. For someone who has spent years avoiding introspection, avoiding their wounds, avoiding emotional responsibility, telling the truth can feel like standing naked under a harsh light. That discomfort is unbearable to them, so they hide. They bury the truth under layers of excuses, distractions, new relationships, or self-protective narratives. They may paint themselves as the victim, or claim the connection wasn't right, or insist that circumstances forced them to act as they did. But beneath all those rationalizations lies the same core. The truth, if revealed, would make them confront the weakness they have spent their whole life denying. They hide the truth because it threatens the image they want to present to the world. Many people construct identities based on strength, independence, confidence, or control, but their betrayal reveals the opposite: impulsiveness, emotional instability, or the inability to handle depth. Rather than allowing themselves to be seen as flawed, they hide behind false certainty. They present the third party as a deliberate choice, as though they walked away with clarity, when in reality they stumbled into the arms of someone who made them feel safer. Not safer in love, but safer from introspection. The truth they hide is not flattering. It exposes their panic, their confusion, their inability to stay grounded when emotions intensify. They don't want anyone, least of all you, to know that they betrayed you, not because the connection was wrong, but because it was too real. Realness is terrifying to someone who has spent years living in emotional shortcuts. They hide their weakness because acknowledging it would force them to realize they never actually left you. They abandoned themselves. There is also the truth of their regret, a truth many try to conceal even from their own minds. Admitting regret requires acknowledging that they acted too quickly, too recklessly, or too selfishly. Regret is heavy, and to feel it, they would have to allow space for guilt. But guilt threatens their internal narrative, so they suppress it, pushing it down with distractions, new relationships, or denial. They hide the truth because to face it would mean feeling everything they worked so hard to avoid. They hide the truth because they know, consciously or subconsciously, that if you saw their vulnerability, their fear, their confusion, their insecurity, you would understand that their betrayal was never about your inadequacy. It would become clear that the entire storyline they crafted was a fragile shield protecting their ego. And people cling to ego even when truth would liberate them. They hide the truth because revealing it might draw them back toward growth, and they are not ready for growth. Growth requires breaking patterns, confronting past wounds, learning emotional discipline, and surrendering the comfort of blame shifting. If they were to admit what truly drove their betrayal, they would have to embark on a journey of self-awareness. And not everyone is willing to walk that path. It is easier to hide behind silence, avoidance, or indifference than to face the responsibility of emotional evolution. They hide the truth because it would expose that the third-party choice was not a powerful decision, but a desperate escape. No one wants to admit they ran from something they wanted, or that they chose comfort over substance. Revealing this would dismantle the illusion of control they are trying to maintain. If they admitted that the connection with you demanded more of them than they were willing to give, they would have to face their inadequacy, not your imagined inadequacy, but their real one. They hide the truth because truth forces accountability. It forces realization. It forces the dismantling of illusions. They hide it because the weight of the truth is heavier than the shame of silence. They hide it because they believe that if they bury it long enough, it will disappear. But truth does not disappear. It waits. It grows. It presses against the inside of guilt until it becomes undeniable. They may be able to hide it from you, but they cannot hide it from themselves forever. They hide the truth because they fear that if you knew the real reason behind their actions, you would see through them completely. You would see the facade, the fear, the emotional stagnation, the immaturity. And once someone is seen clearly, without their protective mask, they lose the power to control the narrative. They hide it because your perception of them matters more to them than they want to admit. They would rather you remain confused or hurt than for you to see their vulnerability. They hide the truth because exposing it would rewrite the entire story, not as a tale of betrayal fueled by desire or certainty, but as a story of a person who did not have the courage to face what they felt. They hide it because their weakness, once revealed, would change everything. But the truth, whether spoken or not, belongs to reality. And reality always reveals what the shadows try to hide. Your worth remains untouched, and your path remains sovereign. This is not just a comforting thought. It is a foundational truth that exists outside of anyone's actions, decisions, or betrayals. When someone turns away from you, when someone chooses another person, when someone wounds you deeply, it can feel as though your value has somehow been damaged. But human actions do not have the authority to rewrite your inherent worth. What someone did to you reveals their character, not your deficiency. Your worth is woven into you. It cannot be stripped away by rejection, betrayal, or abandonment, no matter how intense the pain feels in the moment. People often internalize betrayal as a personal flaw. When someone walks away or chooses another, the mind creates stories. I wasn't enough. I wasn't chosen. I wasn't worthy. But what if the truth has nothing to do with your value at all? What if the real story is that your path is too powerful, too unique, too elevated to be intertwined with someone who does not possess the strength, maturity, or vision to walk with you? Your sovereignty is not diminished when someone exits your life. In many cases, it becomes more pronounced. The wrong people leaving is often the clearing required for the right path to unfold. Your worth remains untouched because worth is not built through external validation. It is not constructed by whether someone stays or goes. It is not measured by who chooses you or who fails to. Your worth was established long before any relationship, long before any heartbreak, long before any betrayal. It lives inside you as something sacred, immovable, and independent of human behavior. When someone betrays you, it may feel as if they have diminished your value, but this feeling is an illusion created by emotional pain, not a reflection of truth. The truth is that your path is sovereign. Sovereignty means authority. It means ownership. It means that your life is guided by a higher trajectory, one that no betrayal has the power to disrupt. When someone betrays you, they may think they have changed the direction of your life. They may believe their exit has created a permanent wound. But your path does not bend to the choices of those who are not meant to walk its full length. Their presence may have been temporary, their lesson necessary, but their departure cannot derail destiny. Often, betrayal serves as a powerful redirection. It removes people whose energy cannot coexist with where you are going. It clears space for relationships that align with your growth rather than your wounds. It reveals who is capable of walking beside you and who is not. And through this painful unveiling, your sovereignty becomes clearer. You begin to see that your life is not determined by the whims of others. It is shaped by your resilience, your evolution, and your capacity to rise above what tried to break you. Your worth remains untouched because the capacity of another person to recognize your value has no bearing on the value itself. Someone may fail to see your strength, your beauty, your depth, your loyalty, your light, but their blindness is not proof that the light is dim. It simply means they did not possess the vision required to understand what they were given. People cannot appreciate what they are not ready for. They cannot receive what they have not matured enough to hold. And when someone betrays you, it often reveals that they lacked the emotional or spiritual maturity to stand beside you. Your sovereignty means that your essence is not influenced by someone else's confusion. Your direction is not dependent on someone else's loyalty. Your future is not limited by someone else's choices. You may feel wounded, shaken, or heartbroken, but your path remains intact. You are still moving toward fulfillment, still aligned with what is meant for you, still guided by something greater than the actions of any one individual. This is the power of sovereignty. Even pain cannot remove you from your trajectory. When someone betrays you, they may expect you to fall apart. They may assume their absence will weaken you. They may believe their choices will echo in your life forever. But what they misunderstand is that your foundation does not rest on their presence. Your foundation rests on your inner strength, your inner wisdom, your inner truth. Pain may temporarily cloud your vision, but it cannot extinguish the fire within you. And as that fire burns, it illuminates your worth more clearly than ever before. Your worth remains untouched because betrayal reveals more about the betrayer's lack than your own. Someone can only betray when they feel disconnected from themselves. They can only abandon what they don't fully understand. They can only choose a lesser path when they feel unworthy of the higher one. Their actions reflect their fear, not your fault. Their decisions reflect their wounds, not your inadequacy. Their departure reflects their limitations, not your unlovability. Your path remains sovereign even when you have loved deeply. Loving someone does not tie your destiny to them. Investing in someone does not bind your future to their choices. You can love and still rise after loss. You can give and still flourish after betrayal. Love is a force that expands you, not a chain that confines you. And when love is met with betrayal, sovereignty steps in to lift you out of the ashes and redirect you toward something healthier, stronger, more aligned. Understand this. The very fact that you survived what tried to break you is proof of your sovereignty. You walked through confusion, heartbreak, and questions that tore at your spirit, yet you are still standing. You continue to breathe, to rise, to seek truth, to seek healing. That is the essence of a sovereign path, one that cannot be shattered by another person's weakness. Your worth remains untouched because you are not a reflection of what someone failed to value. You are a reflection of what you continue to become. You are defined by your strength, your resilience, your integrity. You are defined by how you rise, not by how others fall. You are defined by the love you carry, not by the love someone failed to give. Your path remains sovereign because it answers to no one's betrayal. It only answers to your destiny. And destiny cannot be interrupted by anyone who was never meant to stay.